Hello, welcome to lesson 1 of the R module, Rebooting Your Relationship with Technology. This is all about the surprising science and how to hack your brain's response to phone addiction. In this lesson, we'll be going over the brain's plasticity that we talked about in the habits module, and we'll also talk about some of the crazy, sinister things that companies and corporations down in Silicon Valley do to keep you addicted to your phone. We'll also talk about some scientific studies and what they found about the brain's function and phone overuse. So let's dive right in. Hey, did you know that our brains are like Play-Doh? Did you know that? In the same way that Play-Doh can be molded into pretty much whatever we want it to, we can use our brains to reframe and reboot our relationship with technology. That is the whole basis of this module and a little bit of what we'll be covering in this lesson. So let's dive on in. Did you know that the average smartphone user will tap their phone an average of 2,617 times per day? That's 2,617 times per day. Can you imagine touching, let's call that 3,000. Let's just round up. Can you imagine touching something 3,000 times per day and then extrapolating that over an entire 24 hours, and then doing that every single day? That is so many times. In fact, teens who spend 5 or more hours on electronic devices are 71% more likely to exhibit suicide risk factors compared to those who only spend an hour on such devices daily. This is a study done by the Washington Post. Phone use is scientifically proven to bring your quality of life way down and can easily be compared with substance abuse. I just want to write down here 71% more likely to exhibit suicide risk factors. That's 5 or more hours a day. That is not that far off from the average smartphone user. I think I read somewhere that the average smartphone user spends just over 3 hours. In fact, it may be even more than that as time goes on. So 71% more likely to exhibit suicide risk factors. That is both incredibly staggering and I think very sad for this whole generation. I'm a part of that. I was a part of that. And it's just something to be made much more aware of. Smartphone addiction, according to that study, can result in sleep deprivation, increased stress levels, depression, and anxiety. A study published in Addictive Behaviors revealed physical changes in the brain due to smartphone overuse. The MRI data showed lower gray matter volume in the insula and temporal cortices, a measure of brain activity indicative of physical changes in the brain that is often associated with substance abuse addictions. So that is literally saying the brain is physically changing when you use your smartphone. And it is the same part of the brain that is changing that is associated with substance abuse. So that's all the science that I need, at least, to realize that the phone, using your phone and using it in excessive amounts is very comparable, and if not the same, with being addicted to substances like alcohol and drugs and other harmful substances. Signs and symptoms of smartphone addiction are similar to those of other addictions, such as compulsive gambling and drug abuse. These include anxiety, depression, and behavioral issues, as well as strained personal relationships. So it has more implications than just changing your own personal brain. In fact, the implications extend beyond just you and bleed into personal relationships that you have with others. So there's so much science on this, and it is just on a high level, very, very staggering and very surprising. That's what this this whole lesson is about, the surprising science. So let's talk about utilizing the brain's plasticity. In the same way neural plasticity makes us susceptible to phone addiction, it can be used to reprogram our responses to our phones, flipping the causes of phone addiction on their heads. So I would love to remind you that this is not an art class, and I'm not an artist, or at least a drawing artist. And I want you to take all of my drawings with a grain of salt. This is your brain here. You can tell because it's squiggly and it looks like a big mass of jelly, because that's really what a brain is. Your brain. Welcome to your brain. I wanted to draw a few lines between the phone and stimulus here. So this is the pathway that you take 90% of the time. But you can take advantage of the brain's ability to rewire your own habits to make healthy choices. So when you're being triggered, when you're emotionally regulating, it is very easy to just pick up your phone, because that, again, is the easiest way out. That is where you can get the cheapest dopamine and the fastest dopamine. But imagine rewiring your brain to a healthy response. This is obviously a very primitive version of what's going on in your brain, but this is the whole goal of what we're trying to do, using the brain's plasticity to make that trigger utilize this pathway here as opposed to this one, and completely cancel out the bad pathway that goes towards your phone. You can rewire your brain so it doesn't automatically crave screen time all the time. Keep in mind that it takes much longer to reprogram these neural pathways because they've been in a groove for so long. You know, if you're in this course and if you've bought this course, it's because you really have been prioritizing this pathway here, and it's not a bad thing. We'll go over why that wasn't necessarily your choice in just a little bit here, but visualizing it this way and understanding that this green pathway is the one that we want to go towards and the one that we need to prioritize in order to reprogram our brain is the start of something great and a start of how you might go about changing your life. So I wanted to talk here about Michael Zeiler's pigeon experiment. The big idea here is that unpredictability is one of the main drivers in dopamine hijacking. In 1971, Michael Zeiler, who is a psychologist, conducted experiments on pigeons. While conducting experiments to find out how governments could better encourage a population to encourage charity and discourage crime. To answer the question, Zeiler honed in on one key principle to study, which was feedback. So in this experiment that he had pigeons involved in, he had a cage with 2 buttons inside the cage. One of the buttons, once pecked by a pigeon, would deliver pigeon food every single time. Reliably, you'd peck it, you get food. That's it. The other, once pecked, would deliver pigeon food unpredictably. So you would sometimes peck the button, and it would either deliver you food or not deliver you food. He had it on a random schedule. It wasn't at all reliable or predictable. Michael Zeiler's hypothesis was that pigeons would learn that the predictive button was the obvious choice for receiving food. However, the results were surprising, and 9 out of 10 times pigeons chose the unpredictable button because of the increase in dopamine when it actually delivers. So the conclusion that he came to was that his pigeons were drawn to the mystery of mixed feedback, just as humans are attracted to the uncertainty of gambling. When you're gambling and when you're at slot machines, you pull this. Everything about a casino is based on chance, and typically the odds are stacked against you because that's how you make money as a casino. But there's something about pulling that lever every single time that increases the dopamine in your head. And it's all about the unpredictability factor of winning. And I think the reason that there was so much dopamine in these poor pigeons' brains is that the reward of getting something when the chance of not getting it is there is so much higher. And when you actually receive that reward, when the chance of getting nothing is present, it is so much more actually rewarding when you receive what you're trying to receive. So at its core, this is the same thing that's occurring every single time you feel the urge to pick up your phone. In a roundabout way, or maybe not so much of a roundabout way, whenever you pick up your phone, you are leaning in to that unpredictability factor. You don't really know what's going to be there. You might have a ton of notifications, or you might have 0, but just the chance that you might have a ton of people liking or people commenting or people texting is something that completely hijacks your dopamine and is something that is also built in to who you are as human beings. And I'm about to go over that here as well. It's something that makes us very human and something that is definitely being exploited by companies down in Silicon Valley. Understanding the dopamine-driven reward system. So this is a quote from Sean Parker, the founding president of Facebook. He says that the thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them, was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. So first, I want to call out really quickly the casual candor that he's really taking on in this 2017 interview with Sean Parker, who's the founding member, the founding president of Facebook. He says, give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. I feel like there's so many parts of this quote that just tell you that Facebook and other social media platforms don't always, in fact, maybe rarely, have your best interest in mind. There are a number of things just so sinister about this, I think, and hopefully you're picking up on that too. A few basics about dopamine. Dopamine release is tied to rewarding experiences, as we learned with the pigeons in the slide before. It reinforces pleasurable activities and motivates us to repeat them. Our brain releases dopamine not just with the reward, but in anticipation of it. So this prediction mechanism is a key part of addiction cycles. It's what keeps you going back to picking up your phone. Dopamine is involved in not only feeling good, but also seeking and motivating behavior. Again, that predictability of we could get dopamine if we do this action is a huge part of dopamine addiction, and definitely what Facebook and other social media networks are leveraging. Dopamine levels can influence mood, motivation, attention, and even regulate movement. And lastly, dopamine helps in learning and memory. Experiences accompanied by dopamine release are remembered more vividly. So think about how social media, like the networks that you use, or even your phone in general, leverages this biological feature that we have as humans, right? We have this chemical that's released whenever we get rewarded or whenever we want to be rewarded, or things, it's a chemical that influences our mood, motivation, and attention. It's such an integral part of being a human being. And simply by partaking in picking up your phone or being a part of these apps, you are allowing yourself to be manipulated by people that you don't even know, by businesses that don't even care about you. That is sort of the basis of the content that I've been making forever now, and the basis of obviously this whole entire course. And understanding that this is that first part, that awareness is super key in order to not only make a lasting change, but just reframe and reboot your relationship with technology. Pretty scary stuff. We are social beings who can't ever completely ignore what other people think of us. That is Adam Alter. He's a psychologist. This is a quote from Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. The last Sean Parker quote was also found in Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. Great read if you are very interested in the subject of digital minimalism, as I am. Human beings have an intrinsic need for, can you guess it before I write it down? Approval. That is a biological thing that we have built into us. In fact, in Paleolithic times, which is over 2 million years ago, it was important that you carefully manage your social standing with other members of your tribe because your survival depended on it. Literally, the survival of human beings has depended on social approval. So that is built into our psyche. No matter how much we want to think we're removed from the Paleolithic times, we're still human beings, and we're still distant cousins and relatives of those beings that walked around Earth over 2 million years ago. Leo Pearlman, who's a product manager on the team that developed the like button in 2009, says that the single click of that like button requires little to no effort on your part, but to the user being tagged, it creates a socially satisfying experience of thinking that someone is thinking about you. So it's such a simple thing, especially I feel like if you grew up with Facebook, to like someone's post. I can recall times when you would make statuses that said like for a TBH, and you would like that status, and the whole idea was that the person who made the status being liked would have to send you a personal message that says, TBH, to be honest, I think this about you. And I didn't realize, and I don't think anyone realizes it when they're, a young teenager on Facebook, but the feeling of having someone think about you is so powerful, right? That completely leverages and is predicated on that Paleolithic brain of wanting to be approved and wanting to be liked, right? That is such a, I don't want to say tired conversation, but that's such a common conversation to have in the realm of self-development, is not caring about what other people think about you. But we're social beings, and that is literally just built into what it means to stand on 2 feet and have thumbs, right? That's a package deal, is caring about your social standing in one way or another. And that is exactly what Facebook and apps that have a feedback button, which is, every single social media, which the like button, every single one of those social networks is leveraging that part of the human brain, wanting to be liked. No matter what anybody tells you, that is exactly what these social media networks are doing. So Take that however you will. Remember that we're social beings and we can never completely ignore what people think of us. That is completely fine. You know, you can do your best to not care about what other people think, but there's always a huge part of being a human being that cares about what other people think. So in order to find the right mindset for reset, we have to realize that overnight change is next to impossible, but it's made insurmountably easier with the correct mindset. Correct mindset is fostered by 3 things, and those 3 things are open-mindedness, now that you know how phones hack dopamine, you should be open, and I very much encourage you to be open to finding new ways and to not only finding new ways, but reframing and rebooting your relationship with technology. The next one is awareness. What I've described to you in this lesson is just scratching the surface. It's the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how phones and social media hack your dopamine and your attention and drive so many business moves off of what users like you do when it's compounded with billions and billions of people. So being more aware of that and just being aware of the sinister things and the sinister tactics that these companies use is a huge step towards a more mindful relationship. And lastly here, it is commitment. Commitment to the goal of rewiring your personal brain and also developing systems that allow you to not only stay committed, but continue on for the rest of your life, hopefully, with these resets and rebooting with your relationship with tech. I want to end here with another quote here. This is from Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism, and it is just very staggering. I feel like I keep coming back to the word staggering. As revealed by whistleblowers and researchers like Tristan Harris, Sean Parker, Leah Perlman, and Adam Alter, these technologies are in many cases specifically designed to trigger this addictive behavior. Compulsive use in this context is not the result of a character flaw, but instead the realization of a massively profitable business plan. We didn't sign up for the digital lives we now lead. They were instead, to a large extent, crafted in boardrooms to serve the interests of a select group of technology investors. Crazy stuff. It is simply staggering the amount of things that we're not even aware of as we're using these technologies. There's so much more at stake than who liked your photo or who commented on whatever. You know, it is so important to become more aware of these and then really plan your attack on what you're going to do and how you're going to change your approach to these things. So I really hope that quote hits you in a deep way as it did for me. Let's move on here to the last slide. So mindset is everything, but it's only part of the equation. So let's get some perspective. But before we do, please open your guided journal and go over to the surprising science lesson, How to Hack Your Brain's Response to Phone Addiction, and reflect on how the knowledge how the knowledge of dopamine-driven reward systems underlying phone addiction influences your view on your own personal phone usage. So think about the dopamine being secreted from your brain every time you pick up your phone. Think about what that feels like. And it was kind of a hard thing to visualize, but really take a critical mind when it comes to that kind of thing and think about how it affects your phone usage. And next, how can understanding the brain's plasticity empower you to continue on your journey to reduce screen time? So understanding how the brain is able to physically change not only when you're using your phone, but when you're trying to change how you use your phone. How does that empower you on your own journey? Thank you for being here for the first lesson of the R module. I'm so excited to continue on. In the next lesson, we'll be talking about how to outsmart your apps. So I'll see you there.